She spoke to it not just in a traditional sense, but in a technical and a vocational sense. Because for her, they are the basis on which our future is going to be based, economically and socially. Education in this country has long held a sacred space in the hearts and minds of all Barbadians. As I indicated, it has been drilled into us from very early. The promises of success when you do well and the perils when you do not. But, Mr. President, education in 2022 must be based on more than the 3 R's. They must be based on more than just memorization, sir. It must be based on critical thinking and problem solving. And the work that the ministry has done and continues to do will push us further and further along that path. But I will come to that more later. First, I want to applaud the work of the ministry, sir. Forced into unfamiliar and extreme times by the last few years, our students and our teachers have felt isolated and separated, but they have persevered together. And the ministry has worked diligently, providing tools that one perhaps never expected to be the tools of education as much as they became, sir. Not a pen and a book, but a laptop or a tablet. I want to speak on a few of those achievements. Because the pandemic did not stop the work of the ministry. It intensified it, sir. It intensified the level of innovation among our teachers who took long-held programs and things that they taught and instead turned them into innovative and engaging projections, sir, so that they could reach and engage their students across the screen and across the many miles of distance. It intensified the work of the ministry when it came to monitoring and evaluating, to help to look and see what challenges were being faced, and to provide training and follow-up. To look and see where more work was needed and where more resources needed to be deployed, sir. And finally, I want to applaud the work of the ministry as it relates to counseling and support services. The last 2 years have been hard, sir. They have been hard on grown adults with years of experience. So I know they have been hard on our students. And so the work of the ministry with its private sector partners, providing counseling and intervention has been critical. And there is more to be done. So I want to implore Barbadians wherever possible, you are a part of this ecosystem. When you see trouble, when you see issues, raise them so that our students can get the help that they so desperately need in some cases. But the goals of the ministry, sir, did not stop as it related to broader areas, because I know we can feel that everything relates to COVID. But the work of the ministry did not stop, because you must plan and plant if you intend to reap, sir. And so the ministry has continued to plan and plant on goals such as the school nutrition plan, which is a national effort that the ministry led, aimed at giving children healthier food and teaching them about healthy eating. This is now to be implemented, and that work is reflected in these estimates, sir. And that work is also expected to present a difference in behavior, sir. Because as we all know, sometimes what we eat has the tendency to affect the way we behave. And that is no better seen than in young children who are naturally turbocharged, sir. But when added sugar comes into play, somehow seem to get an extreme burst of energy, which can result in classroom disruption and the inevitable sugar crash. And so the implementation of that work will see a change in the work product of the school meal services, sir. And so we anticipate some measure of assistance in those areas. But perhaps the biggest task of the ministry to come is the work that is being done in the education and reform unit, sir. It is one of the major objectives of not just the ministry, but of this government, sir, to provide for reform in our educational system, to tightly link what is being done in our educational system to what we need as a country, to provide for a holistic training of our students, sir, not just in the traditional sense, but in the technical and vocational sense. This unit has spent its time in planning and preparation and is ready for the implementation, sir. But I want to speak to Barbadians because I know how eagerly we have been awaiting this reform. But reforms such as this do not come about in one fell swoop. Reforms such as this happen in ever-widening steps, point by point, taking care of the margins, sir. And I want to applaud the ministry because they have not just been planning, but they have also been implementing where necessary. Coding and robotics across this educational sector has been one of the things they have been implementing while they're still been planning and planting, sir. To give our students an understanding and a look beyond the traditional sectors that have been available to them. Because that is the point of true reform. To look at this country in a way to move us away from where we have been traditionally locked, sir. In the 21st century, Barbados has spent its time locked into doctor, lawyer, bank manager. Later, that opened up into teacher and policeman. All noble professions, worthy of aspiration. But in this 21st century, we must show our children new skills. We must provide them with new opportunities to join us on the world stage. We must also be able to provide for certification and growth. Sir, this is part and parcel of what diversifying our economy means. It means diversifying our skill sets. It means providing for the needs of the country and of the market, sir. And before anyone thinks to themselves, these are but pie-in-the-sky notions, I want to point them to the work being done by SJPI. Because their work, for me, reflects that kind of visioning, that kind of understanding that you must change with the tides when necessary, sir. SJPI continues in the technical and vocational realm to expand their offerings. Drone technology, photovoltaic electrical installation, wind and energy advisory, sir. Further to that, I want to speak about one small area, sir, that of 3D printing. Because in a time when the rest of the world closed its doors, at a time when Barbados was at risk of not having the necessary equipment, SJPI was able to see the problem and be able to 3D print masks and shields to ensure we would not go short, sir. And I know I speak of that because I led the program, sir. So these are not pie-in-the-sky concepts. These are things we can achieve and do well. But at this point, I must move on, sir, because I've got 2 more areas I must have an opportunity to speak on. The Ministry of People's Empowerment and Elder Affairs, in conjunction with the Ministry of Health, has spent the last 2 years doing the Lord's work, sir. That is my firm belief. Because while the Ministry of Health has been keeping bodies together, the Ministry of People's Empowerment has been keeping mind, body, and spirit together for some in our society. That ministry was at the helm of the distribution of over 60,000 care packages, sir, to the most vulnerable of us, the elderly, the indigent, the disabled in our society. And during one of the most difficult times in our society, they stood up to the task of Hurricane Elsa. And our good Senator Paris, spoke to some of the work they were able to do during that time. And there is much more to be done, sir. I know that. We all know there is much more to be done. But we must applaud the work of this ministry with a stretched budget, which has been stretched even more by the circumstances that we have faced. And we must applaud them for taking care of our persons. We must applaud them for providing for our charitable organizations where they could, and for continuing to persevere through all that has affected them. This bill and the accompanying estimates are a testament to the work that was done and the work that must continue. The ministry held the 55th Independence celebration, sir, and they spoke on a critical theme: fortifying foundations, overcoming adversity, pursuing destiny, sir. And that is the reality of what we all over this government have been doing, sir, all over this country. Fortifying what we have, overcoming the issues, pursuing our future. And the amalgamation of the social services, sir, which is a critical project, is a part of that work. It means taking state-owned enterprises and departments which operate currently in silo-like structures and bringing them all under one department, the Department of Children and Family Services. This move is aimed at providing an ecosystem of support, not hindered by silo-like operating structures, as I mentioned before, but rather bringing them together in a way that serves the public. I want to be clear. This is not done from some willy-nilly objective or some willy-nilly concept that change is what is necessary, not an urge to just try new things for the heck of it, sir. This is brought together by practical knowledge, because there are those in the social working system who would tell you that the system works, sir. It works well for some. But they will also tell you it does not work well for all, and that there are cracks through which some of our people are slipping, sir, and which we must close. So I want to throw my support behind this move. As I have some small knowledge, having had the opportunity to serve in the Child Care Board previously, and I know that there are many cases that come to the board that require multiple solutions, sir. They require work of multiple agencies, and the board alone cannot solve it. But what in fact happens is that person has to go through multiple agencies which require multiple investigations, and all the while, the family suffers, sir. I'll give you an example. If a woman with 3 children living in an overcrowded household, one of those children has special needs, she is unemployed, it is arguable that she will need social income assistance, housing assistance, childcare assistance, assistance with the needs of the disabled child. Currently, she would have to go to and fro, from agency to agency, sir, getting upset, getting frustrated, looking for timely assistance, looking for dignified support. And if we are honest with ourselves, we know that she is unlikely to have all her needs met, unlikely to have as timely assistance as she needs, and unlikely to have it in as dignified manner as she deserves, sir. Because when you are forced to have to explain your circumstances, to have to bare your soul to multiple individuals, multiple entities, again and again, it becomes soul crushing, sir. It becomes problematic. So, sir, I presently believe that this new department will help to aid in relieving that ordeal. But it will also help in the easy identification of the small amount of individuals who abuse our social services, sir. It will help us to be able to see it more clearly and address it more readily. The vision for this department is not one solely based on that work or that belief from the social workers and social services, sir, but it will also involve input from those who use those services, because they know what it is to have to walk into a place and ask for assistance. So they should be able to have some input on how and where that happens. The road to this point has been long, sir, because I know that this is not the first time that an agency such as this has been proposed. And I know that there are many areas still to complete. The work on the changes to our regulatory infrastructure, the work in the social policy framework to make this department a central feature, and the practical implementation issues of change management, human resources management, and communication. But the truth of the matter is to provide transformative services, to provide access for the real needs of clients, to address immediate needs, to help those who can be helped back onto their feet on the road to independence, and to address the long-term requirements are at the basis of what our social services were meant to do, sir. Because I have some wants, selfish though they may seem. I want to see social services move away from a one-size-fits-all mentality, sir. I want to see them address the unique needs of each individual family and bring the entire resources of the ministry to bear. I want to see a level of dignity and care brought back to the system, sir. And that change does not just happen in the ministry, that change happens in the hearts and minds of Barbadians. Because we must understand that needing help is not a weakness. And because you are down does not mean you are out, sir. So I pray that this move assists in bringing on transformation. Because I know it is not easy, sir. I know that there are many cases that are brought to light only in the newspaper. But I want to ask Barbadians as we go about our daily lives that we remember that we are in fact our brother's keeper, that we advocate for our fellow man, that we advocate within families, that we advocate towards ministries, that we advocate wherever is possible, because we are in this together, sir. And so, I also want to take this time to slip in a plea for our elderly, sir. Because I know that the ministry is working on the national policy for aging and elder affairs. But I am like an impatient child, sir. I want it done faster. I want it done better. I want to see an end come to elder abuse and neglect in this country, sir. Too many are left in hospitals, while their families and those meant to take care of them fritter and squander away their assets, sir. I think sometimes we think to ourselves when we are young that we will always be young. But I wish to issue a warning, sir. Time is longer than twine, and that the good Lord has the last laugh. And therefore, sir, I hope that this new piece of legislation features and addresses abuse not only in physical form, but in economic form, psychological and emotional form, sir. And that it provides not only fines, but custodial sentences where it is deemed necessary. Our elderly need to be cared for, sir. Further, I want to add one more plight before I move on. And that is for those disabled persons who are left in the care of the Child Care Board when they are young and who age out of the system, sir. I don't think many Barbadians understand that most of them still remain with the Child Care Board. Because the board cares and it will care for its children, sir. But I believe that more can be done for them. I believe that we have to look into some kind of assisted living facility so they can live in their adulthood, sir, but still have the care provided to them. They deserve that, sir. So I want to ask that the ministry look into this. And with the unconscious of time, I want to come to the last ministry. that of industry, innovation, science, and technology. Because for me, that is one of the most critical features in this government. Critical to what Barbados is, and critical to what we must become. Because we can no longer be left behind, sir. At this point in time, every day there are Barbadians, young and progressive, making the decision to leave these shores because things are just too slow, just too antiquated, sir. And the work of this ministry is part and parcel of how we overcome this. In 2018, it was clear that we had been left behind, sir. Because it was easier for me to do business with a man in Timbuktu, to pay him, than it was for me to do business with my own government in Bridgetown. That is but one of the many absurdities that existed. And there are some which continue to exist. But I believe that we are closer to the light than we were. And the work of this ministry will ensure that we continue to bring ourselves into the light of the 21st century. It's part of why this ministry was created. The recognition that we must take technology seriously, that we must integrate it into our government. And we must not do so merely within the context of a ministry that stands by itself in Warrens, but rather operating across ministries to make sure we are improving the lives of our people, sir, all throughout the government. That is why in 2022, there are a range of government services that I can contract and pay for online. That is the work of the Ministry of Industry, Innovation, Science, and Technology, sir. And may it continue. And its work is reflected, its future work reflected in the estimates, sir. I want to make clear, I want Barbadians to know the programs and policies that are in place, that are being actioned every day in their name, sir, because it is for their betterment. Mr. President, I want to speak about modernization and digitization for a short bit, as I know my time is drawing short.
Another 14.
I want to speak in some small part to the National ID project that is about to launch, sir, that will see the replacement of the long-suffering laminated cards towards the move for a true identity card that would remove the need to walk with 3 pieces of documentation just to prove that you are indeed your mother's child. Barbadians are tired of that, sir. And we are ready to see it happen. I know we're tired of talking about it. We are ready to see it. But I want to speak to Barbadians today. I want to convey to them that I understand your need, your want. But I also want to say that the ministry needed to take its time to make sure it was done right the first time, sir. Because all good things come to he who waits. And so I know we are ready, because I know the shame of walking internationally, being asked to present some form of ID, to proudly whip out this Barbados card that you are so proud and filled with pride in, sir, only to have someone look at you with a bit of pity and tell you put that away and bring your passport. So I know we're ready for it. I also am ready to see the expansion of the scope of work of the government's digitization center, sir, which is focused on ensuring that all the files held in back rooms are digitized and made useful in this country, sir. Mr. President, I know what it is to request a document from government and to have to wait weeks, because some poor government employee must trek to wherever they are stored, climb into back rooms among dusty, dusty boxes, hope that he has found the correct box, and also hope that the ravages of time have not created a bigger problem, then to scan and deliver that information to you. I know that the wait can be burdensome and can sometimes cost in terms of business and in terms of life, sir. That is why this government is committed to the digital transformation, because it must be about making life better, easier, quicker, smoother for Barbadians. And the scaling up of this project will assist, because we will move from 1 shift to 3, sir, meaning that more departments can be serviced quicker and that we can get about the business of the digital transformation, of the digital revolution. I know that we are ready, sir, and that this ministry is engaged, because we have seen as Barbadians what can happen when we move away from doing things simply because it has always been done that way, and instead strip the processes down and rebuild with a mind to what is necessary for the people of this country. And this is why you can now get a police certificate of character in 24 hours rather than 2 to 8 weeks, sir. And the final aspect that I want to discuss for this ministry is important, because we all have to think about it in our daily lives. But this ministry has the task of thinking about it for the whole of government, that of cybersecurity. I bring this up because 2 to 3 Thursdays ago, there was a cybersecurity incident. The relevant alert system sprang into action. The relevant task force was deployed and security protocols enacted. The threat was assessed and actions taken to protect government and its information. That kind of quick and decisive action does not come about by chance, but rather by forward thinking, visioning, planning and planting, because you must at some point in time have to reap, sir. The reality is, threats will come. It is inevitable, sir. As my mother used to say, once you're breathing, troubles can come. But it is about how we ensure that we protect ourselves, sir. How we continue year after year to ensure we are improving upon our systems. That is the kind of work that this ministry is engaged in the area of cybersecurity. They will continue with government cybersecurity audits. They will continue with penetration testing. They will continue with the drafting of the National Cybersecurity Strategy, which is not just aimed at improving the policies for MIST, but all across our government, aimed at reinforcing protections at critical points of national infrastructure, sir, our power grid, water and sewage, ports of entry, our hospital, and many more. These estimates reflect a tremendous amount of work that has been done behind the scenes, and a continuous move towards protecting Barbadians, improving our lives, because the digital revolution is here, sir, whether we want to admit it or not. So we cannot stick our heads in the sand. We must face our challenges head on. We must provide for them. The Prime Minister has often spoken of the digital revolution, of the need to transform us to be digitally enhanced and digitally secure, not just for ourselves, but for those who visit us, sir. She has made clear that this is part and parcel of how we deal with global competitiveness coming into the 2022 and how we will deal with it going forward. And I know that the ministry is prepared to do it, sir. Finally, I want to say this. There will always be armchair economists, sir. There will always be those who feel themselves better equipped to handle the issues that we face. But as Barbadians have proven for the second time, we trust no hands better than those of Prime Minister Mia Motley and the BLP government, sir. And so, we are ready with the passing of these estimates to see the business of this country through. Mr. President, I am not a lawyer, nor am I an economist, but I am a child of this country. Born in this country, yes, but built by this country. And so every time I stand in this hallowed chamber, I will ensure that I speak on what is best for Barbadians and what is in their best interest, sir. I commit to that. And with that, sir, I am obliged to you.
Thank you very much, Senator Roberts-Odo. Senator Nurse.
Thank you, Mr. President, for recognizing me and giving me the opportunity to contribute in this debate. Mr. President, just in beginning, to observe that really the task of a government, Minister of Finance, the Finance Ministry, never has, even in the best of times, an easy task in putting together estimates of revenue and expenditure and putting forward a budget which shows how any shortfalls in the estimates of revenue will be recouped, either by way of taxes, by way of borrowing, or whatever. It is never an easy task, even in good times. So if we add to that the events of the last few years, we begin to understand the difficulties in which any government, this government as it happens to be, has to manage the economic and financial affairs of this country. And it just seems that we have, I shouldn't say a stumbling, we have been moving not through any fault of this country from crisis to crisis since 2020. Still dealing, of course, with the pandemic, still going through the issues relating to the effects of the volcanoes, the hurricane that affected us. And now this year, when we thought that we would be moving on into a world that is getting back to some level of normalcy, the crisis and the war in the Ukraine adds another layer of crisis issues that the government has been forced to deal with. So it can't be easy. We acknowledge that a lot has had to be done in the years leading up to this year. We recognize the excess amount of money that government has had to spend because of COVID, and it's still spending because it's not entirely over. While we've gotten over the bump, we still have some way to go. And it is in that context, therefore, that one must assess how well the government has been able to do or to put forward some proposals which can see us through these events of which I just mentioned. And what it means, of course, for us going forward. We know, of course, the level of revenue that government would have lost. We know the impact on gross domestic product, which has got to be built back up. And so, therefore, one of the more important things initially, or for the government, would have been to see how to get that growth, the level of growth, going again, and to see how we can stabilize our economy, and at the same time, of course, protect the vulnerable people in the society who, in whatever circumstances, we always have to make sure that there's a shield to protect them, and that because they're like all of us, are entitled to a decent living, and therefore the level of humanity and so on, which we have to consider when government prepares its budget, particularly the social parts of the revenue, of the expenditure budgets, to see that those parts of the society are well taken care of. And I promise you, Mr. President, I shan't be long, but I will just highlight perhaps a few areas that I think I would like to see happen as government moves forward with implementing its program for the 2022-23 year. And one of the aspects which I thought was good is that there is some vision in the budget presentation, budgetary and the proposals, that how government sees moving forward for growth. How are we going to get the country growing again? And they have hit on, or they've targeted the areas which I think have been articulated over the last few years that need to happen to get things going. I speak, of course, of the energy sector, the requirement for pushing and getting the alternative energy aspects going. I speak also, of course, of agriculture. It became quite apparent to us during the pandemic, and now with the Ukraine issues, the importance of food security, the importance of having a good agricultural base. And I think for too often, and Mr. President, I have to tell you that this is an issue that I spoke to in more than one debate on the revenue and expenditures in the past. But I think they need to be emphasized, that the importance of agriculture, while we may look to the other sectors, the international financial sector and so on, tourism, of course, but yet that need for security is particularly important. And so I was glad to see, I tend to find that within the past, most governments, I'm talking about this administration, but the administration, this present administration, administrations of the past have not articulated a vision or, come up with a broad-based policy to recognize how we take forward agriculture. I begin to see, I think, glimmers of vision in this, in the presentation of the Prime Minister for the agricultural sector. And I think it is noteworthy that we see where government recognizes that linkages, for example, with our neighboring CARICOM country to the south, Guyana, is so important. I believe, I remember the minister, the Honorable Prime Minister, discussing the sheep project, for example. And that is the kind of vision that I want us to see, and to see better articulated as we move forward. I note, for example, the idea that she has recognized the importance of water to the industry, and the fact that she now, and the Honorable Prime Minister has now put a tariff, I think, a special tariff, I think it's $1.85 for water in that sector. And you can't have an agricultural sector without adequate provision of water at an affordable cost. And so that is key to the development. I note, of course, the idea of developing the whole concept of getting the shared houses and so on, again, in collaboration with the government of Guyana, and developing our agriculture. But I have to say, Mr. President, what concerns me, and it will be an issue if we are ready to get our agricultural sector back up to speed and moving at the level that we wish to see, is the fact that I observed, and this is in reading the 2003 Barbados Development Plan, for example, Mr. President. They identified there were some 45,000 acres of land available for agricultural production. The present development plan, physical development plan, which is in draft form at this stage, could only identify in 2017 25,000 acres of agricultural land. So, Mr. President, within a 15-year period, approximately 15-year period, or 14, we have lost almost 50% of the available agricultural land. So the question is, how do we push agriculture? How do we recognize, having recognized that this is going to be a key aspect for food security as we move forward? How are we going to ensure that we protect that remaining 15,000 available. In fact, I would venture to say that we must probably be on the periphery now of, adequate lands for our agricultural purposes. And that observation is glaring, and I raise it because the government in the same proposal, the same budgeted budget proposals, and in fact, the government, when it campaigned in the last election, has made it a plank of their platform that they intend to have built 10,000 houses over the 5-year period. So my question is, where is the land going to be coming from? Where is the land going to be coming from to satisfy that requirement for space to meet that objective of the government? And government has to balance. What I'm saying is that there has to be a balance in that. Government has got to make sure that they're not going to be using up or withdrawing that remaining agricultural patrimony to provide land spaces for housing development. We have got to use what is available for agriculture and to see that that is properly protected. Now, that does not mean that you're saying you're going to abandon your proposal for your 10,000 houses in 5 years. What it means is that I caution government, therefore, not to take the easy route, not to decide. The easy route, of course, is to take agricultural land and use that for housing. So look for the alternatives. I am aware, for example, Mr. President, that there's lots of developed land which have been given permission for development for housing and so on, which today is stand idle. There's still a lot of spaces within the city as we move out, as we know what is happening in Bridgetown, Mr. President. And the government has signaled its indication in the past or hinted at doing housing projects within the inner cities. I recall hearing of plans, for example, for the old Treasury building to be looked at as a possible housing area for housing. And so the point I'm making, Mr. President, is that, look, we can increase the densities, perhaps in those areas, the housing densities in those areas, by looking for strategies such as now apartment, condominiums, duplex housing, the types of issues which will not call upon us for the use of more and more land space. And so it is there. The land is there, I think, to do what government wishes to do in terms of housing, but it's also the opportunity for them to for government to protect that remaining 25,000 acres. And I would humbly suggest that I think one of the issues, Mr. President, which I think the government should early in this year start to do is to resuscitate. I know years ago in the Ministry of Housing, there used to be a whole set of housing statistics which were prepared and developed, and which provided information on things like the number of houses, the types of houses, the densities, and so on. It is the type of information with which government would be well armed as it go forward in terms of its policy implementation for housing. And I think the Ministry of Housing, I don't think, I haven't seen it for years or heard of the availability of that kind of housing statistics, which was developed some years, quite a few years now. And I think that is important. I also think, Mr. President, that it would be useful to have a census, some sort of housing census by the same research committee within the Ministry of Housing, so that, again, we can identify the types of houses, the conditions, again, so we have information provided for government to carry out its policy in an effective and efficient way. I would also, in similar fashion, having spoken about the question of the agricultural land, I would also, in similar fashion, recommend another agricultural census, and as I said, agricultural development plan, which I am sure would be of immense value, again, to government in terms of its policies as it moves forward. Mr. President, so that is the area of agriculture, and that is having set a vision and a proposal for getting agriculture going. Those are the things that I see that will be necessary. Allied to that, of course, is another issue which I just wanted to touch on, and this is the whole issue of planning, physical planning, the whole issue again of the various capital developments, both in the private and public sector, which were articulated again by the Honorable Prime Minister, and which is she expects to get going within a very short period of time. But I want to raise it in the context of issues which need to, again, to be resolved. And I'm thinking of the planning, the town planning issues. Mr. President, you know, again, 2019, and I had the good fortune, I think, of being part of that parliament which debated the new town planning, 2019 Town Planning Act. I believe, sir, that it was only recently proclaimed, probably, I think, towards the end of 2019. But that requires, of course, a completely new shift in the operations of the planning department. It has, in my mind, relegated to some extent the importance of the chief town planner, because a lot of the functions have now gone to a board, and will have to, and in fact, the chief town planner will now only act at the directions of the board. I want to raise those issues because, as I said, it has only been recently proclaimed. The Act calls for a tribunal, which also has responsibility for any developments over a particular site, which will. So the tribunal, as I understand it, has two functions. It will look at developments over certain sizes and with various issues, but it will also be hearing appeals of the board. I don't think the tribunal is in place as yet. I know that the board is still the board is still in the process of having itself properly formed and working and so on. I know it's only recently that the director has been appointed. So the point I'm making is the importance of getting that whole department of government up and functioning, because you are going to be depending on the town planning people to be able to give decisions in a timely and efficient manner. We don't want to hear that all of these investments which the Honorable Prime Minister foresees happening, that you hear, but they can't start because they didn't get planning permission. But that has been we hear that over and over and over again. And I don't want to get personal, Mr. Prime Minister, but I've gone through within recent times issues of also trying to get some permission. So I know that it can be a very frustrating aspect. And you don't want projects, development projects, both government and both private sector, to be held up because they can't have these approvals, Mr. President. So
On a
we
point
need
of
to
order,
make
Mr.
sure
President,
that in the
sir.
shortest period of time that
On a point of order, Mr. President, sir.
Yes, ma'am.
I should just like to make the point for the benefit of the honourable member that the planning permissions of the major projects to which the Prime Minister has recently referred have already been given, so that they are not in the process and are unlikely, therefore, to be held up by a failure to grant permissions or the bureaucracy of the process. But I do take the point that the honourable member is making relative to the difficulty. It is just for the sake of the accuracy of the record to point out that those particular projects have already been approved.
Thank you very much.
Mr. President, it is not to cast blame on or try to blame anybody. It is just to make sure that we get up and running and get these things functioning. We know all the complaints. We've heard even in these debates and in the, well, I can't say the other place now because we happen to be in the other place, but you know, in the House, where members have been complaining about the slow pace and so on, at which the departments of government have functioned and have frustrated, you know, the general public. And I don't think that we always understand the implications Just to go through, for example, a concept. If you, as an investor, a hotel investor or invest in some other aspect, invest in alternative energy or whatever, let's say you would have made a decision to invest a year or two ago. You put in your application to the town planning, you put in, and you have to wait. You would have prepared your investment based on the existing cost of materials, based on the existing cost of labor, and so on. Now, you come along, and it takes a year or more to be able to get that approval through the door. In the context of what has happened within the last two years, you now have the situation where we know the impact of freight charges on our imports. We know the impact that the Ukraine war is having in terms of our oil. Now, when we factor in now that imports or inputs into the building industry are to a large extent imported materials, then we realize that because of that delay and not being able to get started at the time we intended, it could suddenly have an impact on the investment cost of a significant increase. So you now have to go back and reassess, reevaluate the whole project to determine whether or not it is still a feasible project and whether to proceed. Now, I don't think that we always at times realize that. We believe that business people are always always looking to cast blame on the public sector. But these are the issues that are of huge concern for business people. Once you decide on an issue, once you decide on a project, you have to get it going. You have to get it going, because once you start it and you have an escalation in costs, it's going to have it can have a severe impact on your returns at the end of the day. And the same thing with energy, sir. The same thing with alternative energy, sir. Complaints that we have been hearing for the past year, 2 years, about the length of time it has been taking to get approval for your energy project. I am glad to hear Honorable Senator Thompson speak to these issues and to recognize, just like me, that of the importance of moving swiftly on it. I don't know if the board, the new board, I think it is called the ALPA board, which has to approve those alternative energy projects. I'm not sure if it has started its work or if it has been constituted as yet. But there again, we need to make sure that we get going as swiftly as we can. And so, Mr. President, if we can deal with those issues, if we can see a more timely intervention by the powers that be, I think, and we can get those projects going, it will have a very positive impact on the economy and our GDP growth as we move forward. But it has to happen in a very short period of time. Mr. President, the next area that I just want to briefly touch on and which was being mentioned by the Prime Minister in her budget, really relates to national insurance and the fact and the announcement of the restructuring of the National Insurance Department, to set it aside from government and to set it up as a proper as a statutory body. I really have no problems really setting it up like that, provided that it operates at the level, again, of efficiency and so on, which is necessary to see the important work of that body moving ahead as swiftly and as efficiently as possible. And part of that efficiency requires good and sound information. I raise that, Mr. President, because the Auditor General's report, the latest Auditor General's report of 2020, which was laid in 2021, highlighted the fact that the National Insurance Department right now has not had an audit, produced an audit since 20, and don't let me misquote, but it says the National Insurance Fund has been established to allow for eligible Barbadians to benefit from programs established to provide monetary benefits to seniors and others who meet qualifying criteria. The audit of the accounts of the National Insurance Fund continues to be a challenging exercise. During 2020, the audit of the 2011 financial year commenced. However, this has not been completed. There was a number of significant errors in the accounts, and the department has requested some additional time to try to attempt to correct them. And he goes on to say, in my previous report, I had indicated that in order to bring the audit of the fund up to date, there needs to be the submission of accounts and supporting schedules in a timelier manner, and that if current trends continue, the office would be hard-pressed to complete the audits of more than 2 to 3 years during 2020. This pessimistic assessment was not even realized, and this situation remains unacceptable. Some efforts are being made to improve the situation, and my office will ensure that the relevant resources are available to complete the audit, and when the accounts are brought up to date and are presented for auditing. So 2011.
Senator, just for the record, could you indicate what you're quoting?
This is the Auditor General's. This is the Auditor General's report, sir.
This year.
And it's on the web page.
No, this year. Just for the record, in the debate, if you're quoting, you just have to indicate the source. So this year's report.
Uh-huh. So.
This year.
What year?
No, I thought I said it. It was the 2020 report. I'm sorry, but I thought I had mentioned it.
Thank you.
But that is really. So how can we go forward to establish this new body when, obviously we don't even, from a financial perspective, we really don't even know where we stand because we haven't had any audited report since 2011. So this is an area, again, that we need to resolve. We need to make sure that all of these difficulties and all of this confusion is not carried over into this new body. Otherwise, we really will be spinning top in mud. And So I call on whoever, the powers that be, whoever they be, to make sure that we get it right when this new body is established. And I can also mention in the same Auditor General's report, of course, the unemployment fund. There again, their audited accounts are only at the stage of 2013 and 2014, Mr. President. And, I can go on. I can even mention the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, Mr. President, again. They're up to 2011, and the accounts for 2012, 2019, we don't know. So we cannot continue like this. We can't. We have to do better if we are to achieve these very worthwhile projections that the Honorable Prime Minister and her Ministry of Finance has set going forward. So I think in terms of pension reform, I think definitely it has to be done. But I think that I would also like to suggest not only the administrative aspect of it, which is, of course, the setting up of this new body, but also to recognize that the whole National Insurance Fund needs to be completely reassessed and reviewed again. The last actuarial review, if memory serves me correct, and they would be subject to correction, I believe was 2017, but I stand corrected. But the point is that I believe actual review is now due. Again, that is important. And this is why I'm saying that we have to look at the whole national insurance structure again. Because when we look at what has happened to the demographics in terms of age in Barbados over the last couple of decades, we recognize that what used to be a pyramid has now changed somewhat to something like a mushroom, where you have much more people in the 60 and over, the 50 and over age groups, which of course has significant implications for the ability of the national insurance to have adequate financing and funds available to provide the pension benefits for that growing number of people who have now reaching pension age. And so I think it's not only to look at what the pensions of the public sector, which government has done and that's indicated, that now in order to have a full pension, one would have to go to an age of 40 years to be able to have a full pension vested. So there is obviously a suggestion to me that in the public sector, they're looking at public sector pensions, but I'm saying that as overall, we need to take into account the pensions provided to general public by the national insurance scheme and make sure that we make whatever necessary adjustments that will be required to make sure that that fund can adequately finance the pension liabilities in the years ahead. And of course, we know that the investment portfolio probably would not have been performing at its highest within the same time frame. We know that there would have been a significant impact on the funds when government would have done its debt restructuring back in 2018. And so again, it's important to make sure that we look at those investments, look at the level of return of those investments to determine whether or not they're going to be adequate. If we determine that they're not going to be adequate, how do we adjust the pension benefits to make sure that they're still adequate to provide the pension going forward? So those are very important issues, I think, that we have to take as a whole and discuss pension issues as a whole and in a more holistic manner, because as a matter of fact, the Prime Minister also indicated that from this year, or from the new financial year, that National Insurance is going to have the responsibility for administering all pensions, government pensions and private pensions, and so on as well. So that is very important. And just to throw in a little thing here now that I am on pensions, and the fact that it may very well, when we do that actuarial review, prove to us that, we have some substantial difficulties. I am suggesting, Mr. President, sir, that we should perhaps, it may have been a good idea to reintroduce at this stage an incentive which was taken away some years ago. I speak, and incentive I'm talking about, I'm speaking of a tax incentive. The tax incentive of which I speak is the Registered Retirement Savings Plan, which allowed persons to be able to make contributions into a registered retirement savings plan, which would in effect supplement their pensions from the national insurance or their private pensions from the private company, the company that they may be working with in the private sector, or even government. The government pension could be supplemented by this registered retirement saving plan scheme. And it allowed basically, if you would recall, sir, it allowed basically that a $10,000 deduction against your taxes, which you could then put into this registered retirement savings plan. And it may have been time, and I think it is probably timely, that something like that. I know, of course, government will say it's hard-pressed to be able to give more tax allowances and so on, but it may in fact help to cushion the impact of lower pension benefits, which of any adjustment in pension benefits, if it became necessary to have to reduce, it may be useful for retirees to have that fallback. And so I throw that out as well. Mr. President, the other thing I just wanted to say, and I know that time is running on, is just a quick mention of education. And recently we have been hearing of proposed reforms in education in terms of the transfer of students and so on from the elementary level to secondary level and so on. And again, we have been talking recently within the past few days a lot about consultations, the importance of consulting with your various constituents and getting the feedback. And again, I raise that because when this reform was announced quite recently, immediate reactions from the teachers' union, for example, was that, but we haven't even been consulted on these issues. Subsequently, they were told that, oh yeah, well, yes, we made the decision, but we will now go through the process of consulting. Now, again, I don't think that that is necessarily the best way of doing things, but if that is how it is, the point is that I am urging all of the powers that be, the various educational experts, and I'm not an expert, so I'm not going to get into it, but the various education experts, the teachers, the teachers' unions, the parent teachers association bodies, all the various bodies which have, which will be impacted, and the general public as well, be given that opportunity to look at what is being proposed, articulate what their feelings are, and then, if necessary, and we have to rethink or relook at what has been suggested, that we do so before we implement it. And I would strongly suggest that you look at the case of Bermuda, for example. They are in the process, of course, of dealing with issues, educational issues, so just now, and they're speaking about the elimination of middle schools and so on, and looking to introduce these other aspects, some of which are hinted at in our proposed new reform. So I would strongly suggest that we look at that as well and take that into consideration, take their experiences, and make sure that any shortfall, any pitfalls and so on that they would have had, that we can avoid them. But the point is, there's a lot to be done. We are going to a new system. It means new training for teachers. It means an understanding of things. It means how we look at our resources. Are we going to have resources, Mr. President, to be able to do all of these specialist teachings and so on, and in all of these various schools that are going to be set up? Do we have the resources? Do we have the training? And those are the things that we will have to look at and to make sure that they're in place. And I fundamentally don't have any big quarrels about the elimination of the 11 plus. So this is not an argument for retaining 11 plus exams or not. I think that it's a question that has been knocking around for a number of years now. And if the present minister and the ministry is going to take it and grapple with it and make sure that they put a new system in place, all I'm saying is just let us go through the process so that we end up with a system that is good for our Barbadian community, that is robust, and that will see us through for a number of years to come, sir. And just then, quickly, to sum up a few things, in my presentation in the last budget, actually, Mr. President, I specifically remember speaking a lot about the whole issue of electric vehicles, for example. And I remember specifically suggesting that maybe the whole idea of duties on electric vehicles needed to be relooked. And in fact, if we were going to nudge the general population towards making that shift, there has to be some incentive. And so I was very happy to see the level of incentive given. I really didn't expect 100% removal of the duties from electrical vehicles. What I had suggested then was a kind of a rebalancing, but where you sort of put the burden of the tax on the fossil fuel vehicles, the diesels and the gasolines, to discourage people from purchasing those, and have a smaller rate on electric vehicles to encourage to make the shift. But I'm happy that government sees that as an important point that has to go forward if we are to meet those 2013 goals that we have set ourselves. And the other thing I would just like to briefly touch on is, again, as part of that whole process, the Honorable Prime Minister has said that loans for public sector, I beg your pardon, the public sector loans for vehicle purchases will be increased to $93,000. Again, a good thing. The only question I would have is that I believe public sector car loans usually tend to be repayable over, I believe, a 5 to 7 year period, depending on if it's a used vehicle or if it's a new vehicle, and so. But that loan limit was $50,000. So my question is, are you still going to maintain those 7 year or 5 year repayment period? Because it means that you could very well be doubling up the installment payments required from the civil service. And I don't know that the level of salaries and so on in the public sector is going to be adequate enough that within that same 7 year period you can repay the $93,000 as compared to when it was only $50,000 repayable in 5 years. So you may have to look at extending the repayment period for those loans so that you don't encumber the civil servants with these higher repayments such that it defeats the whole purpose of what you were trying to do in the first place. In other words, if the repayments are so high that civil servants decide they can't repay, that much out of my monthly salary, so I'm going to have to stick with my fossil fuel vehicle, then it defeats the whole purpose of nudging or getting that movement towards electric vehicles. And that's not a big issue, but it's something that I'm sure that can be dealt with by the civil service quite easily. And so, Mr. President, those are a few of the issues I just wanted to raise and to opine on. I think overall, in the circumstances and in the context of which I spoke to at the beginning, it has been a pretty good effort to satisfy all the various constituents. I know that there's still cries from certain people about, certain pandemic taxes and so on, but I'm sure they can defend themselves, and we know what will happen because their banks will more than likely recoup that loss through the additional fees and so on, which we always seem to suffer. But I think overall, I am comfortable with the proposals going forward, provided we can get that infrastructure and architecture that is necessary in place to see these projects through. And so it is with those few words, Mr. President, that I am obliged to you.
Thank you very much, Senator Nurse.
Mr. President,
Senator Cummings.
Mr. President, I beg to move the suspension of the Senate for 15 minutes.
The question is that the Senate be suspended for 15 minutes. That will bring us to midday. Those honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it. The sitting is therefore suspended until noon. This sitting is resumed. This sitting is resumed. We revert to announcements. I have the honor to inform the Honorable Senate that I've received the following message from Her Excellency the President. Her Excellency the President to the Honorable the Senate. Her Excellency the President has the honor to inform the Honorable the Senate that, in accordance with the advice of the Prime Minister, Mr. Gregory Paul Bertram Nichols has been appointed under Section 36(2) of the Constitution as a Senator, with effect from the 21st day of March 2022. Dated this 21st day of March. Please admit him. I want to welcome and acknowledge the presence of Senator Gregory Paul Bertram Nichols, our newest senator. Welcome him, please. Senator Nichols, we look forward to, I'll give Senator Cummins the opportunity. For Senator Cummins, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. On behalf of the government side and the Prime Minister of Barbados, I would wish to welcome my schoolmate and friend and newest member of the parliamentary party to the Honorable Chamber in the Senate. I look forward to his long experience in law, constitutional law in particular, both as a lecturer at the University of the West Indies and a practitioner in his own right, bringing that formidable experience to bear in this honorable chamber, Mr. President. I am confident that he will enjoy the full support of the existing members of the Senate, and I would wish to extend our congratulations to him in my capacity as leader of government business in the Senate. Welcome to you, Senator Nichols.
Senator Nurse.
I'm happy to be able to join with the others in welcoming our newest senator, Senator Nichols. I have had associations and with Mr. Nichols in other areas for quite a long time. I know of his capabilities, and I am sure that he will bring his expertise to bear on the debates. And I look forward to hearing his presentations in this session as we go forward. So welcome, Senator Nichols, and I wish you well.
Thank you very much, Honourable Senators. I want to join with the Honourable Senators to welcome you, my friend and brother, to this Honourable Chamber. We look forward with interest to your presentations here. You're no stranger, of course, having served in this chamber with distinction previously, and we welcome you back for your second sojourn in what should be a very interesting and exciting session. Thank you very much. Senator Nichols.
Mr. President.
You need to press it again. No? Okay, yeah, please proceed.
Mr. President, Madam Leader of Government Business, Senator Nurse, thank you for your warm welcome back to the Senate. I trust I would equip myself appropriately and look forward to participating later in the business of the Senate. And I would like to thank you all again for your warm welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Reports from select committees.
Mr. President, I'd like to move that the report of this Committee of Selection be adopted as presented by the Honorable the Senate.
The question is that the report of the Selection Committee, which was circulated, be adopted by the Honorable Senate. Those Honorable Senators in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Meetings, the ayes have it. The report stands adopted. It means, of course, the other committees are now fully formed and functioning as outlined in the Selection Committee report. Thank you very much. We revert now to public business. Senator Mr. Maynard.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I too would like to welcome Senator Nichols back to this chamber, and I'm sure that he will add life and energy to it. Mr. President, there has been lots of talk about the youth, and I, many years ago, came across a document that I felt was important, and I think I put it away too safely, so I could not find it. So I called on one of my young family members to help me. And what I thought was going to take weeks took about 15 minutes. And I want to refer to this document, sir, in my brief presentation. Sir, and this document is called the British Union Oil Company Report of 1947. And it's titled, A Geological Investigation of the Groundwater Resources of Barbados. And its author is Albert Sen. Albert Sen is a famous Swiss geologist who did lots of work in Barbados and Cuba. And what prompted me, sir, to make this inquiry was when I was a boy not so long ago, there are many, many, many fan mills. And when I heard an announcement that we only had 122 water wells, I did not believe it. I could not believe it. And my family has lots and lots of old black and white photographs, sir. And every photograph in the country, there's a fan mill or two in the background. And this report, sir, bears that truth. The total complement of water wells at that time was 734. So I asked, what has happened to them? Have they been filled in? Are they now receiving sewage? They certainly couldn't have been reconstituted as rock. So they are there. And therefore, sir, there's an obligation by those in charge to find them, sir, and to record what their use is. Because with all the work that is being done with water, if we continue to contaminate the source, just in case these wells are being used for the wrong purpose, then we would not have achieved anything. But, sir, I wish to read a short section of the report. And this is the section that says future water policy. Mind you, this is 70 years ago. And it says the total reserves of water set aside for the public supply are 12 million gallons per day. That works out to about 45 cubic meters a year. And it claims that that is to suit the population of approximately 192,000 persons at the time. And they projected that the improvements, which will give 15 million gallons per day, would have allowed the population to grow to 375,000. Sir, we have barely reached 300,000, and our requirements are way, way beyond that. Of course, sir, those requirements were estimated based on the living conditions at the time, where most people did not have access to running water, and we certainly did not have flushable toilets. Sir, the current state of play lists Barbados very, very high on the top of the list of water scarce nations. And Barbados is estimated to have approximately 306 cubic meters of water per person per year in the average rainfall year. And most of this water, sir, is supplied from abstraction. And that comes through the Barbados Water Authority, which is a public company. It comes through commercial irrigation schemes and individual properties, sir. And there's also industrial cooling, like sugar factories and rum factories, which have their own wells. Mr. President, there's a large amount of water used on farms and plantations and on golf courses that we don't think about. Yes, sir, golf courses. If you drive certain areas here at night, you will hear the sprinklers, and they are not small. They pump large amounts of water. Sir, the abstraction done by the Barbados Water Authority is controlled on the abstraction generally is controlled by the BWA Act, Cap 389, and the Underground Water Control Act of 1953, Cap 283, which the Prime Minister, sir, I think the Prime Minister referred to it in her budgetary presentation, sir. There's also, sir, surface water, and it's controlled by the BWA Act, the Pori Spring Act, sir, and the well-known Free Houses Act. Sir, wells in this country, water wells, are supposed to be licensed. And the records to date do not match in any way what existed before, and it's a big problem. The Water Authority gets its water from 21 wells and 2 springs. And desalination. And desalination, sir, and all water production is a high-energy business. Now, this document, sir, spoke to the geology of Barbados and the sources of water, and even then, sir, which wells had high chlorine content. So some of the problems that we have now with high chlorine content in the water in certain parishes were recognized a long time ago. And the infrastructure, sir, which we have that transmits our water is not new. Some of it is 100 years old. And there have been, the work of replacing this infrastructure has started. It started in last administration and has continued in this one. But it is long, it's arduous, and it's expensive. But sir, there's also water by impoundment. And impoundment usually is surface water. And if you look on Google Earth, you can see sites, because there's no space in Barbados to store water underground, except at the reservoirs. So if you go on Google Earth, you can see places like Westmoreland, Claybury, Fraser's, Millennium Heights, and Farmers and Apes Hill, where the large catchments. And sir, all this water belongs to someone. And I am really pleased that this government has recognized that there's an economic value of water, whether it's potable water, sir, or sewage. That water has an economic value. So when, sir, years ago we had sewage flowing freely on the streets, that was money running away. Government has spoken about the plan for water reuse, for sewage water, that I'm sure will be, in time, it will be fully fleshed out. And the plan initially seems to be to supply that water for agricultural use and possibly, I suspect, for replenishing the non-potable aquifers. What makes the water valuable, sir, is that when we want to use it, it costs energy, it costs money for energy. And a lot of the money, a lot of the costs incurred is spent in either producing the water to the condition you want it, with desalination, pumping it from the ground, pumping it distance, and, sir, some is also spent in purification. Mr. President, those of us who drive in the countryside will notice that at Bowmanston, there's a large photovoltaic system. And I suspect that by now, after several years, it's up and running. And I'm certain that that is taking some of the load off the government in terms of the cost of energy to run the pumping station. And I would not be surprised, sir, if that level of development continues in all the areas where water is pumped. Now, some years ago, the Prime Minister of the day asked a senior town planner what he thought was the most important thing that was restricting development. And to his horror, the town planner said, "Sir, water." And the Prime Minister opened his eyes very wide and said, "What?" And he said, "Well, sir, without water, we cannot open new areas for development." And sir, that happened sometime before we established a desalination plant. That is probably almost, I would think, approaching 20 years ago. And we still have the problems of water supply in terms of volume, not quality, because we still have quality water. Mr. President, there's been talk about expanding our population. And if our population is going to be expanded, we need to have a lot more potable water. And desalination alone cannot be the answer. Now, the BWA produces 41 million gallons of potable water per day. Remember that in 1947, 15 million gallons was considered more than adequate for 370-something thousand people. We only have 300,000. And you can do the maths. You can see it's at minimum 3 times as much for the smaller population. All the sources, wells, springs, and desal, produce about 186,000 cubic meters per day. But the use of the water, Mr. President, has increased in the last year from 164,000 cubic meters, sir. That's a 34,000 cubic meter increase. So I asked, where's the water going? Could a lockdown cause us to increase our water use so much? Mr. President, the answer probably lies in what is called non-revenue water. That we are pumping it, sir, but it's not arriving. And it speaks to the problem with the infrastructure. So, Mr. President, if you were putting your money into the bank every month, and when you went to check on it, between 37 and 50% of it was gone, you'd be very upset. And you will know that you can't keep doing it. If you the more you pump, the more you're going to lose. So the answer has to be a combination of, I suppose, increased pumping, but you also have to, with haste, fix the infrastructure. Now, Mr. President, and I stand subject to correction on the number, but I recall that there is legislation that states that if you're building a house that's over 1,350 square feet, and once again, I can't tell you that I'm accurate in that number, you're required to put in a cistern that will catch the rainfall from your roof. And that adds considerable expense, sir, to house construction. And it's a requirement to get a certificate of compliance when you're finished. But there's never been, as far as I know, any enforced policy about the use of this water that we've been collecting, or been forced to collect, or that we're supposed to collect. And what it requires is for us to go back and find ways that people can conserve water, sir, and use the water that is being collected in safe ways. And maybe we need to consider green plumbing, where persons can, I guess with washing machines, use the same water and use it for things other than washing cars. You might be able to flush your toilets from it. All water, Mr. President, has value. And the development, sir, of the renewable energy sector and solving our water problems are intricately linked. And I'll give a simple example, sir. If it's unlikely, sir, that persons are going to be wetting their gardens at night with a hose. And I think that in today's world, you can have a cistern with water and have your pump run from renewable energy. So you increase your costs, your daily costs for using that system in terms of energy will not rise very much. In fact, it should fall in time. And maybe there should be incentives given for persons to start to use that water. Now, dengue, sir, was a thing of poor districts. And as a child, I recall the health inspectors come around and spraying various collections of water with insecticide. But, sir, I put it to you that dengue now, sir, happens among, and waterborne illnesses like that are mosquito-borne, happens among people of all social groups, and particularly among those with tanks that are not being emptied and looked after, because they're places where mosquitoes breed. And we therefore need, sir, to start back on that path. And because sooner or later, sir, the value of that water that you've been collecting is going to become critical. And while I don't believe a government will ever move to regulate or bill you for the water you're collecting, they should really be telling you, these are the ways that you can use this water. This is the legislation you put in place that allows you to use it sensibly. And this is how this country will save on it, because we need all the water that we can get. Now, Mr. President, if our population is going to grow from whatever sources, we can't wait until it's reached the desired level of size to then increase our water needs. And our water reuse policies are, whether it's at the individual level at your home or nationally, has to, before we start to put things in place, have a large public education component of it. And do not repeat the same mistakes that we made before, where people spend large sums of money in putting in cisterns and they have no use for them. Also, our prejudices about things that are recycled. And the average person will probably think that when you go to London or one of the big cities and you drink some water from a tap that has just been pumped from the aquifer. And that certainly is not the case. It's often recycled water, recycled to a quality, a certain standard. So we need to get our people, sir, accustomed to thinking that recycled water is safe water. And sir, that's all I wish to say on water. Sir, I now want to make a few comments, careful comments about health. Sir, the COVID pandemic has affected every country on this planet. And this small country of ours has done very well during the pandemic, and not by chance. And it's done well because of all the work of all the people involved, the government and the people. But it cost, Mr. President, and as the Honorable Prime Minister outlined in her budget, the cost of the work, and it's not over, and it still continues. And, Mr. President, it has to be paid for. So we have to accept, as Barbadians and persons living here, that the money has to be paid by all of us. And while we can quibble about who pays what, the reality is it has to be paid. So I accept, sir, that my 1% is but a small charge for all that has been done. Mr. President, the cost of facilities like Harrison Point was not cheap, but that, sir, was probably the most visible one. Isolation facilities like the schools that were already in existence, they all had a cost, sir, in terms of maintenance at a point in time and actually the day-to-day running of these facilities. But our main tertiary care hospital was expanded in the sense that it controlled these facilities. And therefore, the budget of that hospital, while it might have appeared to be large, a significant part of it, sir, went towards servicing the expanded QEH. Now, sir, the effect of the COVID pandemic affected healthcare in every way, both in the private sector, sir, and in the public sector. And the QEH, because of some policy decisions, had a series of shutdowns where elective procedures were essentially suspended, and we're only doing urgencies and emergencies. Notwithstanding that, sir, people continue to develop problems. So we now have a situation where the need for services almost outstrips our ability to supply it. And that is not blaming anyone, sir. That has happened simply because there has been a shift of activity away from the hospital in certain areas into the private sector where it never stopped. And I think, sir, that's reflected in the earnings of the hospital. The QEH, up to 10 years ago, earned about $12 million annually from providing private services. At last count, sir, it was down to $3 million. And what that means is that the persons who would normally bring people to the QEH for care or refer them for care privately are no longer taking them there. They're going somewhere else. And if you look around, you will see there are a number of new, I say new inverted commas, new centers that offer alternative care. Now, I don't know, sir, if we can reverse the trend, but we can certainly, the QEH can certainly do things, sir, that will encourage persons to use its facilities for private care again. Because even if they're not being used, they have a cost to maintain, sir. Now, the backlogs that I spoke of earlier, sir, with regard to outpatient services and surgeries has to be approached in a systematic way, but not just to solve the backlog. It's to put in place systems that will probably, in time, improve the overall efficiency. Mr. President, some time ago, I stood in this chamber and I said that if we spent a large sum of money, I think it was $11 million on the refurbishment and the expansion of the A&E, and we did not fix the problems of flow, then persons, unfortunately, would have a nice place to wait. And at last count, there was no improvement in the waiting time. And I know we've all been consumed with COVID, but unless we fix that problem urgently, we might crash. Because you cannot have a hospital, a tertiary care hospital, that has 100% bed occupancy. It means that when you slip and break your ankle, unless you can afford private care, you have no place to go. So we have to fix that problem of being overoccupied. And we have to come up with ways of emptying some of the wards and allow for more efficient services to happen. Now, there seems to be some areas where, certainly in surgery, there are backlogs that are spoken about in the public domain. And, sir, I think I can